Do you remember those adventure modules that had italicized text that you would read to the party in order to really set the mood for your adventure? Are you having difficulty reimagining that or recreating it in your own tabletop RPG? Well, today we're going to be talking about vignettes and how you can set the scene. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Dungeon Brew.
Welcome back, everybody, to Dungeon Brew. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most powerful and overlooked tools in collaborative storytelling and tabletop role-playing games, vignettes. Today we're going to be talking about what vignettes are, how they work in storytelling, and how you can use them in your campaign. Overall, we know that they are tools that really just make the world richer, the NPCs feel more compelling, and it helps your players be more invested in the game that they're playing. Let's start with the question, what is a vignette? Well, at its core, a vignette is a short, descriptive moment that adds depth to a scene, and it doesn't have a traditional beginning, middle, and end to that little segment of writing. And instead of focusing on the action or plot progression, a vignette is meant to immerse the player in the world by painting a very vivid picture with sensory details, mood, and atmosphere. An example of this would be having the party move into a forgotten temple. And instead of just saying you step inside and see stone pillars, you would want to set the scene with a vignette. The scent of damp earth clings to the cracked stone walls. Faint torchlight flickers, casting jagged shadows that slither across ancient carvings of gods long forsaken. Somewhere in the dark, something shifts. Soft, almost imperceptible. Watching. And suddenly the players are there, feeling the damp air, sensing the tension, and hearing the movement. And that's the power of a vignette. And you may be thinking, that's a little much. Why do we need that? Well, the reason that we use vignettes in TTRPGs is because they serve several functions. One, they can easily help us set the mood. They establish a tone, whether it's eerie or hopeful or chaotic or mysterious. They can help us enhance immersion with our players. It deepens the player's connection to the world overall by activating their senses and places them within that space in their imagination. It can also help us reveal some character motivations. You can subtly highlight an NPC's intentions or their emotions or their conflicts by the type of description that you offer to the players. I personally like to also use it for foreshadowing. You can help drop hints about the future events, some of the dangers, or even some of the themes that exist within the world, and it helps you provide some world-building lore without just dropping information at a whim to all the players in a document. It helps you have some insight into the history and the legends and the cultural details that you might not be able to do otherwise within the game. Okay, so you may be asking yourself, that's great, but where exactly do I introduce this so that it doesn't seem out of place? Well, I think that looking back at, again, older adventure modules can really help us answer that question because there's primary times that they utilize a vignette. One is when you're introducing a new environment, whether it's a haunted mansion or a war-torn battlefield, a lively festival. A vignette can help you paint that first impression of that particular scene. You can also use it before or after combat. Set the stakes before the battle or describe its aftermath, and this really makes it feel impactful in some way. So I usually have contingencies based on what happens in the battle to give different vignettes based on the choices that players make. You could also do it during rest or during travel. A quiet moment by the campfire or a slow trek through, rain-soaked roads can add a layer to that downtime, and sometimes it enhances the feeling of the atmosphere, the themes that you have going on, even if there's not a particular encounter that is coming up after that downtime. You can also use it when you're introducing new NPCs. So a well-crafted vignette is going to immediately establish the importance of an NPC as well as their personality, their status, or if there's some mystery that's kind of hovering around them. And then lastly, I kind of touched on this, but to reinforce a theme that you have. If your campaign is about corruption or war or survival, vignettes can subtly kind of reinforce those themes throughout the game based on the language that you use. So an example of this, you have players that are going through a city, they're on the brink of rebellion, and instead of just stating, the city looks tense and the people are whispering, you could say, banners of the fallen king hang in tatters from the rooftops. Soldiers march through the streets, their armor gleaming under the torchlight. But the people, faces drawn, shoulders tense, don't look at them. They glance instead at the alleyways where shadows move, where quiet voices promise revolution. In this way, the players aren't just told what to experience, they can actually feel what's going on. So this leads us into talking about how to write a strong vignette. And there's 5 techniques that I want to share with you. The first one I kind of touched on earlier. It's making sure that you are capturing the 5 senses. This is also a technique that writers use when they write books. So let's start with sight. You want to talk about shadows dancing, candlelights flickering, blood pooling on stone, things that they can see. Then you have sound, so the hum of an incantation, the scrape of a dagger against armor. Smell, you may talk about wood rotting or fresh parchment or the scent of burning sage. If you're looking at touch, it may be the cold of an iron shackle or the sting of the icy wind. If you're talking about taste, it could be the bitterness of a stale ale or the metallic tang of blood. You want to look at those 5 senses and bring them out in your descriptions so that the imagination takes over for you. Next, make sure that you are keeping it concise. A good vignette should enhance the scene without stalling the gameplay. So you want to paint a quick, vivid picture in about 3 to 5 sentences. Do not launch into a 5-minute monologue that disrupts the pacing of the game. Number 3, show, don't tell. Instead of saying the guard is scared, say his hands shake on the hilt of his sword, his eyes darting to the alley as if something unseen is watching. Make sure that you are giving some description of what's going on so that players can make their own interpretations of his actions and play off of them. And that leads us into number 4, where you want to weave in players' actions with your vignette. So they aren't just for the game master to feel cool in a moment, it's about a player prompt as well. And you can ask an open-ended question with that, where it's, you could say the old innkeeper watches you carefully as you step inside. Something makes you think that he's afraid. Why do you think that is? And then let the player give some oration about why he thinks that innkeeper might be afraid based on what he knows so far about the area. And this, again, invites the players to engage with the world. And then my 5th tip is to, again, make sure you're reinforcing the story's themes. If the campaign is about survival in a harsh world, your vignettes should reflect that. The wind howls the ruins, carrying with it the stench of old blood and forgotten hopes. And if your game's about magic and wonder and beauty, then you'd be like the stars twinkle in the mage's palm, swirling in patterns unseen. Each is a whisper of the universe itself. You want to have these vignettes align overall with the themes and strengthen your storytelling. It's a lot of fun to understand the genre and the themes that you're playing with in your tabletop role-playing game, and then being able to use language that is going to ignite a visceral response out of your players. So I want to just give you a few more examples of what you might utilize, but think about your own genre. And if it's helpful, John and I did a whole series on genres that you use in tabletop role-playing games that you can go check out. So let's look at maybe dark fantasy as one of our genres. The ancient cathedral groans as the wind howls through its shattered stained glass. The stone floor is slick, not with rain, but with something darker. Or think about the language you would use in a high fantasy game. Sunlight glints off the marble towers, casting long golden shadows. The air hums with magic, the streets alive with the chatter of merchants and musicians. Or what if you're playing in a horror setting? A child's laughter echoes in the empty hallway. The candles flickers, the laughter stops. Or let's say you're doing a high-seas swashbuckling adventure. The ship's deck tilts beneath your feet, the scent of the salt and the spilled rum thick in the night air. A storm is brewing on the horizon. So there you have it, a way to approach collaborative storytelling while also setting the scene in some way. And these vignettes can help you add that immersion, it can enhance your atmosphere, and it can bring some depth to your tabletop role-playing game. I'd like to hear from you. What are some of your favorite scenes that you've ever described? Let me know down in the comments below. Otherwise, hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to go subscribe to our Patreon, where we have free resources for game masters like you. Talk to y'all next time.
Dungeon Brew.